guys, and welcome back to our YouTube channel, Mastering the Wedding Photography Biz.
I'm Hunter.
And I'm Sarah.
And we have couples ask us all the time if they can bring their dog along on their engagement session.
And while we do everything we can to accommodate this, it definitely changes the way that we set expectations and how we structure our sessions. So today we are going to be teaching all about how we photograph dogs during our clients' portrait sessions.
So it may seem obvious to you that you should accommodate dogs in the first place, but early in our career, we had an experience where one of our couples brought their dog to their engagement session without telling us in advance. And since we had never shot a portrait session involving a dog before, we had taken literally 0 steps to prepare us or them, and we were generally just still figuring out how to be portrait photographers in the first place. It was basically a huge mess.
Yeah. And not only did we feel like that we didn't get great photos with their poorly behaved dog, but the fact that their dog was on the session actually prevented us from getting very many good photos of just our couple.
Now, we were very new photographers at the time, and so we made the mistake of thinking that the dog itself was the problem and not the fact that we just hadn't prepared or set expectations with our clients.
Yeah, because the thing is, for a lot of young couples, their pet is an important part of their family. But even if you're shooting a family session, a grad session, or a wedding day, incorporating a dog can be an incredibly personal and important touch for your clients.
And honestly, sometimes we'll be reviewing our client's engagement session gallery ahead of their wedding day, basically just seeing which photos were their favorite so we know what to prioritize during their wedding day. And we will see that they downloaded and favorited photos of their dog more than the ones of like them and their soon-to-be spouse.
So yes, incorporating a dog into a portrait session can definitely be more stressful and complicated, but there are things that you can do both in advance and during the session in order to make the experience less stressful for you, to give your clients and their dog a great experience, and to deliver some incredible photos that your clients are going to cherish for a long time.
So all that being said, that doesn't mean that we recommend that every client bring their dog. So the very first thing we want to do is set expectations with our clients. And so when one of our couples first asks us about their dog, our first question is whether or not they believe a portrait session is the type of environment where their dog is going to thrive.
So basically, if their dog is super social, well-trained, and it loves going to like parks or just other outdoor locations and meeting new people, they are probably going to do great during a portrait session.
But we also want to help our clients realize that if their dog doesn't like new people or really doesn't like being in public spaces, or if they have like a brand new puppy who has absolutely no semblance of obedience and is just going to run around like crazy with that insane puppy energy for the entire session, that bringing their dog along may not make the most sense for their engagement session and could just end up sort of stressing them out and distracting them from what is most important, which is like telling the story of their love leading up to their wedding day.
Yeah, and in a way, this goes for them as well as their dog. If they think that bringing the dog is going to stress them out a lot, we're going to encourage them to just leave their dog at home and let the engagement session be about them and just them.
And especially because dogs are very attuned to the emotions and the feelings of their owners, right? So if our couple is feeling very nervous and anxious about their dog and its behavior, the dog can actually pick up on that and will become more anxious, more nervous, making their behavior worse, and the whole thing spirals and the whole day just ends up being a mess.
So the second thing that we think about when it comes to expectations is actually the location. Sometimes we'll do an engagement session at like a private location like a vineyard or maybe the couple's wedding venue, and that venue might not allow dogs at all.
Or other times we might be in an area that requires like really extensive hiking or is like a really tight area where having a big dog is just not going to be practical. And so if having their dog with them is super important, then we're going to steer our couple towards, 1 or 2 locations that we know make a lot of sense for bringing their pet along to the photo shoot.
The final thing that we want to do when it comes to setting expectations is making sure that our clients realize that their session will be different if they bring a dog as compared to what it would be like if it was just the 4 of us.
They are inevitably going to have less time for portraits of the 2 of them because basically everything we do with a dog is going to be a little bit more complicated and take a little bit longer. And so we will actually tell our couples who bring a dog the same thing we tell parents who are going to bring toddlers to a family session, which is that they have almost no control over the behavior of their, dog/toddler. Both leading up to the session, so, the 2 hours leading up to it, as well as during the session. And so just knowing that things might be a little bit more chaotic ahead of time is going to help them so when it is inevitably chaotic, they don't feel like they've done something wrong.
Yeah. But for the parents of well-behaved, social, energetic dogs, we tell them that we look forward to meeting all 3 of them at their session.
Now, the first and most important pro tip that we are going to give you guys that you should communicate to your clients is that their clients should bring a dog wrangler. We are emphatic about this with our clients who want to bring a dog. And so this can be, our bride's parent, or this can be, a sibling or a friend of our subject. Really doesn't matter, but anyone who can come along and help manage the dog and is going to be responsible for the dog during the part of the session that doesn't include the dog, which is going to be a pretty big chunk of the session, but we'll get to that a little bit more later.
Yeah, because this is their engagement session. We know that the bulk of the photos that we are going to take is going to be just the 2 of them. So what we don't want to do is spend 75 minutes of a 90-minute portrait session with their dog tied up to a nearby fence, or locked in their car with the windows down that they're constantly checking.
Yeah, and honestly, a few years ago, we had a couple who brought their dog to their engagement session but ignored our advice about bringing a dog wrangler. And so once we finished up with the photos with them and their dog, their new puppy basically spent more than an hour straight just crying and whimpering, just wanting so badly to get off the leash and come and be with them. And of course, this made our couple, and especially our bride, very visibly, stressed out and guilty, and she felt really bad. And it negatively impacted her for the entire session. And you can kind of see it in some of their photos. And honestly, we're pretty sure that, maybe she wouldn't say this, but we're pretty sure it sort of tainted the whole experience for her. And we know that she probably doesn't love the engagement photos as much as she would had the dog not come at all, because we know as photographers that the experience someone has when they're with us is going to affect the way they view their photos. And so if she spent the whole hour feeling guilty and stressed and constantly worrying about her dog, it's going to be really hard for her to look at the photos and enjoy them after the fact.
Yeah, and there have even been times where tying up a dog nearby wasn't an option. And so one of us spent the majority of the shoot trying to shoot with one hand and holding the leash with a dog on the other, which, as you can probably imagine, was just a huge mess. And we just don't do this anymore. I mean, I'm not a large woman.
Yeah.
So holding a golden retriever while shooting with a camera doesn't work super well.
It's just so much better and so much easier to just have a friend or a family member who, especially if they already know the dog and love the dog and the dog is familiar with them, to literally just take the dog for a walk during that latter portion of the engagement session.
Now, here's a few more pieces of advice that we give our clients ahead of our dog-friendly engagement sessions. Now, the first is that we tell them to arrive early to kind of acclimate the dog to the new environment.
So often during a session, the dog will, be sort of going crazy, and they're like, oh my gosh, he's usually so much better than this, or man, she's so much better behaved at home. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense. Dogs are sort of like kids, that they sort of get this nervous energy and excitement or confusion when they find themselves in a new and unfamiliar place. And in a dog, that can lead to them disobeying commands they otherwise normally will obey, or otherwise just sort of being harder to work with or harder to get under control.
So just having our couples arrive even 10 minutes early to take the dog for a walk around the location, help get them familiar with the sights, the smells, the sounds, will just help them feel a bit more comfortable when the photos do start.
Now, another thing we recommend is that you as the photographer spend a couple of minutes just interacting with the dog before you start shooting. And so once you've arrived, you say hello to the couple. The first thing you should do is get down on the dog's level, pet it, say its name over and over, make sure it knows that you are a friend. And
something you're going to do anyways, really.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully if you're not a sociopath, but really spend some time and pet the dog and just show it that you're a friend, love on it a little bit.
And you can even bring your camera down to its level, let it sniff your camera once or twice so it knows the big black lens in your camera, that item's not a threat. And just do this with your lens cap on so that you don't end with that cute little nose making a nice wet mark across your lens. It's gross. But we also do this with kids. We let them see the camera. So this is friend, it's okay.
Ironically, a lot of this advice also works for toddlers.
Yeah.
But so finally, the last piece of the last little tidbit is that we will tell our couples to bring their dog's favorite toy and a handful of treats. And so the more attention grabbing the toy or the tastier the treat, if the dog is especially food motivated, the better. And this is what we're going to use literally to get the dog's attention throughout the session, as well as to reward good behavior.
Mm-hmm. Now, finally comes the session itself. When one of our couples brings their dog to an engagement session, we typically only want to spend 15 or 20 minutes of our time together taking photos with their dog. However, if the dog is especially anxious or excited or just like not well behaved in general, that 15 minutes of shooting can very quickly suddenly become the first 30 minutes or more of your session.
And so that's why we always want to start the session with the dog photos, so that once those, photos have been taken, we sort of know, okay, now it's just the four of us and we know how much time we have. And so we sort of know how fast we need to move and what we need to prioritize, because it would be awful if we said, okay, cool, dog photos will take the last 15 minutes, and we spent the first hour and 15 minutes with just our couple, and then we brought the dog photos in thinking they would take 15 minutes, and it took 15 minutes just to calm the dog down. Now the sun has set, the session is over, there's no more light, we need to leave, but we never got the dog photos, right? That would be tragic. And so that's why we always start the session with dog photos, knock them out, and then move on to the remainder of the session.
Yeah, and when the time comes to actually start shooting a couple with their dog, this part of the session is actually just really simple. We always start the session with some walking photos, and we just tell them to walk their dog on the leash like they do every day.
And we just ask them to keep the leash maybe a little bit shorter than they normally would, so the dog stays a bit closer to them. And we might have to do this several times in a row if the dog is really pulling on the leash. But as we're doing this, we make sure that our aperture is a little more closed down so that all three of them are in focus. And by the way, if you do need help with aperture, there is a link to our couple videos on aperture up here.
The next thing that we like to do is just try to get a couple photos of our clients just interacting, snuggling their dog. We might have them throw a ball or just give them a treat or just give them some belly rubs. These kind of more genuine, authentic portraits are oftentimes the favorite from the session.
And finally, if the dog is well behaved and seems like it is going to be able to handle a posed portrait, then we'll have them put together like basically the same way we would a family portrait. So if the dog is big, maybe it'll sit while our couple stands, or if it's smaller, we'll either have them like hold it in their arms, or maybe let it sit and they sort of get down around it. But either way, we just want to sort of get all of them together looking at the camera if possible.
Yeah, and while we're taking these and really any other photos, we make sure to use any commands that the dog already knows. And when we are trying to get the dog to look at our camera for a posed shot, we will literally just hold the treat or its like favorite toy right above our lens with one hand and shoot with the other. That way the dog appears to be looking right at the lens, even if they're just looking at like the tasty treat.
And when you're shooting dog portraits during an engagement photo shoot or wedding day or as part of a family session, honestly, the most important thing is just to have fun and be really gracious with your clients, because they're probably feeling nervous or self-conscious about whether or not their dog is behaving or whatever. But if you just take the whole thing in stride and are very laid back and accommodating, it's going to make everyone, including that dog, feel a little bit more at ease.
Also, don't forget to get the dog's close-up. An individual of the dog, that's a fan favorite.
Always gets printed.
Every time.
Every time.
But that is it for this week.
Guys, thank you for watching. If you want more great content like this delivered right to your inbox, we would really strongly encourage you to sign up for our 4 Photographers newsletter using the link in the description.
And when you sign up, we will send you a copy of our ebook, 5 Essential Tips for Turning Your Side Hustle into a Full-Time Photography Business, just as a free gift to you.
And of course, please like, subscribe, and comment below if you have any questions.
But we'll see you next week.